Hello. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Is that
I'm
alright?
also here.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
You can still go like half an hour and everything.
Alright, well, let's be fast.
We're gonna have to condense.
Not too much noise.
Hello and welcome to Mediate. We're back.
Alright. So this is
Felt like we weren't even gone.
this is 2000, Ethan's episode.
Yeah, that's correct. So, let's start off with honorable mentions then. I guess I could go through mine first. So, I believe I've picked Traffic.
Yep.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, Traffic is a film, from 2000, directed by Steven Soderbergh. It's got a great cast. And the film is essentially a bunch of different inside looks into the war on drugs. And it's been a while since I saw it, but I remember really, really liking it, actually. And what I remember liking about it was that it seemed to be like a really accurate depiction into all the different facets and aspects on the war of drugs that you wouldn't even think about. Because essentially what you've got is, I think it's about 3 or 4 different stories. They slightly interconnect, ever so slightly. Because what you've essentially got is Benicio del Toro. He is some Mexican police officer trying to crack down on the southern side of the border. You've got Michael Douglas, who's playing a politician who is trying to crack down on drugs as well, but he finds out that his daughter is a drug abuser, so he has to deal with that. Catherine Zeta-Jones' husband was also a drug trafficker, and he's died, so she has to take over the business and continue on the empire. And Don Cheadle plays some cop as well, who's trying to protect some informant. I think that's basically what it is. But I remember thinking it was a really good film, and that's about all I'll say, because we haven't got a lot of time.
We do.
So,
Don't worry about it.
A similar,
Wait.
So similar to you, the accurate depiction of something, and they've really thought it through. That's why I've picked Chicken Run.
For the Holocaust.
Can't believe Oscar Schindler just
Swooped in at the end of Chicken Run.
Anyway, I mean, there's not much to say about Chicken Run. For me, it's just it's a chilm of my childhood. It's a film of my childhood. It's. I mean, I've not seen it in a while, but it holds a good place in my heart.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've picked something that we've said so much about already. There's no point picking it. American Psycho. I think it's one of my favourite films of all time. I really love it. It's the easiest IMDb pick, which is why I'm getting it in here before anyone else can pick it. Classic movie. Ethan basically wrote a book, which is American Psycho. I feel like we've referenced it so much, but it's worth saying that it's just one of the funniest things I've ever seen. One of the greatest performances of all time. Yep. What else is there to say?
I agree.
The book's good too. Enjoyed the book. Ethan was gonna pick American Psycho and Snatch, which is a fantastic dog with a bill, originally for 2000, which I was looking forward to. He's gone for a different route. I still enjoyed both the films, but it's a shame that Snatch isn't going to get mentioned. But yeah, American Psycho.
If for Mediate 2, I could pick the book American Psycho and force you all to read that.
Well,
I mean, the book acts as essentially an extension, like some of the great scenes from the film. There's just more of it in the book, and then horrific pieces of violence, which are. I don't like Bret Easton Ellis as a man. I think he's a bit of a shit. But
But the film essentially pretty much just copy and paste a lot of the book.
Yeah, but the film...
Like basically every scene in the film you could just find word for word in the book.
Yeah, but the film edits a lot of the shit out of the book.
Yeah, that's true. It does a good job of that.
I'd say the film's better than the book. Yeah.
Okay, my honourable mention is the anime series Ghost Stories, which I am picking because in stark contrast to how round 3 part 4 of IMDb went, I'm picking because of the English dub, because I have no idea how the original it goes, but in the English they were like, hey, this is a show literally no one cares about, let's just take the piss out of it as we record the audio voiceover. So he just tells this ridiculous, like, crazy Sword Art Abridged style, like, just comedy story over the top.
It feels like an abridged, but then it's the actual English dub, and that's just glorious.
Yeah.
I've seen some comparison between the scenes of how they run in the the sub goes and how the dub goes, and the difference is just great. It goes from like just a completely ignorable anime basically to one of the funniest things. And I think what makes it interesting is this one has just got a more British or like Western style of humor, because that's who's creating the humor for this.
Yeah, they definitely do a good job of playing on tropes. We've watched like a couple like compilation YouTube videos. There's quite a few good ones. There's the quote where it's like, "Oh man, I'm just doing my standard anime pose." He says, like standing up with his elbows.
Pose.
Yeah, it looks ridiculous. It's very funny.
I've watched the whole thing like 3, maybe 4 times, so
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time watching this.
We definitely could watch it together at some point. That'd be fun.
Comedy TV series with British sensibilities, do you think?
I mean, he said
Kinda
British. I'm
reminds
pretty
me
sure
of-
it is American.
Kind of reminds me of Black
Yeah.
Books.
Yeah, well, that's why I quickly changed it to Western. I was like, oh, shit, it's probably not British.
You know.
But yeah, kind of wish I'd picked Ghost Stories for my TV round.
Oh well.
No. Black Books is a great comedy, written by the same person who did Father Ted, and yeah, I'm not going to mention his name, partly because I've forgotten it, and partly because I don't want to. Yeah.
Graham Linehan? Graham Linehan, is that his name?
We shall not speak of it. Yeah, and also the IT Crowd, and this is like I feel this is the least well known of his things, but he continues on with the same sort of trio he has in the IT Crowd of a nerd, an Irishman, a woman. But no, it's really hilarious. It's got I think it's called Dylan Moran playing Bernard Black, who runs this bookshop, and just his comedy is just great. You've got Bill
Bailey?
Yeah, Bill Bailey, and Samson Grieg, and they do a good load of going off each other, and just it's
Good load of going off each other.
it's just characters back and forth. Yeah, it's just one of those good British comedy shows.
Nice. Has anyone else seen it?
I really ought to.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Like, no one has that I like mention it
Yeah,
to.
it's
Even
been
if
on my
they're-
watch list for a long time.
Yeah,
I
even
think
if
it's
they're-
one of the last few like great 2000s British sitcoms that I want to watch. So I kind of want to save it a bit like Tony does with Spirited Away, because I know I like it, and I like Bill Bailey specifically quite a lot more so than the other two.
The first episode has Martin Freeman in it as a doctor.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah,
He's in everything, that guy. Everything British he'll be in an episode of at some point.
It's
or
not
another.
actually. I mean,
He's got a great role in Love Actually as well. He does a good porn star, that guy. I
what a
think.
film. Wholesome Christmas.
So does that lead us into your picks then, Ethan?
Yeah, let's start off with the one that no one likes.
Shut the fuck up.
Alright, so let's start off with In the Mood for Love. So, so this is a film I really, really like. It's about 2 people in Hong Kong, I think. Well, I think does it go over more than 1 decade in its entirety? It starts off in the 60s.
I think it just becomes late 60s, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
possibly,
just
yeah.
late 60s.
Yeah. So it's about 2 people in Hong Kong in the early 60s, and they're both in relationships. And towards the beginning of the film, they both find out that the other half of their relationship is cheating on the other half of the other's relationship, if that makes sense. And through realizing that, they both decide to strike up some sort of connection relationship. It's difficult to describe, but it's mostly platonic. But as the film goes on, you can tell that I think the man, who's either called Mr. Chan or Mr. Chow, I can't remember which it is. I'll search that up in a second. And I think you can tell that he wants more from a relationship, and I think he's actually falling in love with her. But she doesn't really want to stoop down to the level, because that's originally where they started in the first place. They wanted to find some way to get back at the others, but not stoop down as far as to cheat on them.
It's more they sort of want to understand the mindset of their partners, basically. They kind
That's
of
how it kind of starts, because there's a bit of a
Yeah.
role-playing thing going on, which is a bit weird.
The role playing goes throughout the whole thing, basically, but it very much starts out with a kind of, oh, that's not what my husband would do, trying to kind of work out how basically they ended up in that situation. But they're always kind of repeating to themselves that they're not their partners and they're above this and they're better at this. And then sort of as it goes on, the I think he is Mr. Chan sort of runs up and goes, no, we aren't better than this.
Yeah, in fact, I will search that up pretty quickly. Yeah, so I've seen this film about, I think, 2 or 3 times now, and I've liked it about as equally each time. And I think one of my, I think for this film, it's a combination of a couple of small things, things that aren't even, I think, particularly difficult to do, but they just work well together. And when you put all of those great things that I like about it, it turns out to be a film that I really, really love. And one of which I'm not sure I'm sure you all did, but there's a cool little thing about it that I like, that you never actually see the faces of the cheating partners. They're always in the background. It's almost as if the story is saying that these people are actually important, and they're kind of, even though they are the ones that technically kick the story into action, they're not really that important. You should focus more on the main central characters.
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of absent throughout the whole thing anyway. They're kind of on a trip.
I think you only hear them speak a couple of times. I think you probably hear Mrs. Chow's husband maybe a little bit, and I can't ever, because I think mostly when you hear Mrs. Chan, I think it's mostly on the telephone when she's talking to her husband, and you don't really hear what she says, so you don't get a lot of her very much. But there's one thing. The other thing that I like about this film is that, there are some fantastic sections in it. There's a particular piece of music that plays throughout
like
quite
6
a few
times.
6 times, could have been twice as the amount. I wouldn't have cared because I love it that much. And they really work to elevate the film, I think. We were talking about, I don't know why I always go back to this one as my example, but when we were talking about The Empire Strikes Back, I mentioned that there's a scene in the film that I go back and rewatch because the music is so good.
What, Ricky's death?
What sequence is it?
It's the low-hanging
like,
fruit. Had to go for it.
Yeah.
The Metroid sequence, not Metroid, the
Meteor.
Meteor sequence,
Asteroid.
the asteroid field.
Yep.
Yeah, because the music's so great.
The bit
And,
where Metroid shows.
And then Deadpool.
And yeah, in this film I get the same sense. There's 2 or 3 that I go back and rewatch, I think, quite often. Especially when I first watched the film, I was watching them like a couple of times every day for like a good 2 or 3 weeks, I think. And there's the first one that you see where they're playing mahjong in the room, and Mr. Chan's. You know what? I'm going to search that up. Can someone please talk while I'm searching this up really quickly, because it's really annoying. I want to make sure that I got the
What
names
were
right.
your guys' initial impressions of the film? Did you guys like it? Or dislike it?
Well, I feel I don't know, because I appreciate it from like an artistic point of view, but it just didn't really do anything for me as a whole. But I'll sort of get into that as we talk about individual things, such as the sort of repeated musical moments that all show either of the 2 main characters sort of walking along like they're not, sort of listily in a way, without much purpose. And I just said that to point it out. I'm stalling here. Is it showing?
Well, I mean, that's what podcast is, right? Just continuous stalling for points.
Well, you can come back to me now because I've searched
Okay.
the names. I've got it completely wrong. It's Mrs. Chan and Mr. Chow.
Okay.
That's really annoying. Yeah, so there's the scene where they're playing mahjong, which I love going back, and that's the time you hear the piece of music, and that's really when it has its impact on you.
Did you watch the English dub?
No, of course not.
Yeah,
Why would I watch the English dubbed?
exactly. 'Cause
It's
they
live
probably-
action, it's not anime. There's a difference, Tony.
I mean, we watched the version that Ethan provided.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, obviously he was saying that more to like have a dig at me.
Yeah, I know, but I'm having a dig at Tony.
Uploading a version I wanted to watch. I mean, it was the only version I found.
I watched the only version I found.
Fair enough.
Wait, what? Of Wolf Children? Right,
I actually
okay.
went to
thought
my
you-
website
no,
that I always
so-
watch films on.
I thought you were now talking about In the Mood for Love and you just didn't watch the version of the It was completely useless.
I watched the
yeah.
Italian version. Where they're eating spaghetti and meatballs.
We're not a million miles away because I do eat noodles. I mean, she eats noodles a lot in this film.
They go up and down those stairs, you know.
That's still a sequence that I really like. The stairs to go and buy the noodles, I think, is really, really good because you see it twice actually. And for for a sequence where you also hear the same piece of music in both of those sections, I feel like it does a good job of not making it. I don't think it feels too repetitive. Actually, I quite like it. It almost feels like it feels like a running theme of that film, that recurring piece of music and the slow down montage sections.
It's a very repeated motif.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's a good song, I don't care.
I would disagree.
I mean, it is a good song, but it just it never if it then rise above with something, basically, if then on the final time we see that scene, it does something that then either completely fits it needs an extra twist, I feel, to have made all those times worth it in a way. Otherwise, it just, unless that's kind of what the film wants as an overall, is just a sort of feeling of, okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Kind of what it is going for with the ending it sort of has, of the sort of missed moments in a way. But this is where it comes into I kind of appreciate it as a piece of art, but for me, it I don't know, because it misses those moments.
Was it to do with the characters themselves as well and the performances? Did you not think they were easy to get into?
Yeah, I just didn't feel anything for any of the characters, basically, apart from the random guy, basically.
Well, the guy that comes in is like, yo, I need to pour $30 to save face.
He has the most personality.
Yeah, I mean, he's yeah, sure. So he's quite a lively character.
Yeah, and watching, because you showed us that video of, or put up a link to a video.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, good.
And the guy there sort of points out how he is the first character you see not framed basically within another frame of a doorway or a corridor or something. And I think that's part of the reason why he's just the most human, is because he just is. That's the way the kind of...
Yeah. No, he's
and that's me an example of how, it's a cool sort of shot, having everything at arm's reach, basically. It does a good job of portraying that, but it kept me at arm's reach, which when you're trying to involve someone in a film is not a good way to get you involved in a film.
Possibly, but I know that from the very beginning, well, because it... no, I suppose. But for me, when I'm watching the film, in the first 20 minutes or half an hour, when you first watch it, and you realise that, well, you know that the other people in the relationship are spending a lot of time away from one another, and you could kind of see where it's leading to. And the moment where they both realise it, I think it's easy to get involved with them. I mean, it's the fact that they're being constantly lied to and being deceived on a daily basis that really gets to me here. And that's why I care so much for the central characters, because they have to put up with this stuff, and also because they're moral enough not to do the same thing that they did.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, because they're shown to have a kind of, a kind nature, basically. But it's, I don't know, I never got hooked behind their characters.
Understood. You know what else I really like about this film? I think there's one moment in particular which I think goes to show how much I quite like. There's something kind of, I think, almost minimalistic about it in a sense. So you have the final scene where he goes to that temple and you see him whisper into a hole and cover up with mud, and that's a reference to something that he's previously said earlier on. And you have to make that leap. You actually need to be paying attention without having a character look to the camera and say, yeah, you see this thing that I'm doing now, this is what I was talking about earlier. It's like, it assumes that you're watching the film and they don't have to talk about everything they're doing every second or reference everything firsthand that they've already mentioned.
In my opinion, I would say it relies too much on that sort of subtlety to it. It makes
I like subtlety. Yeah, I love subtext, Tony. This is me.
But it's there's nothing to grab your attention.
Right. So you want all the information spoon-fed?
That's literally not what I said, Ethan. It just relies too much on it, in my opinion. It's I suppose it's the sort of advice of show don't tell, right? It's I don't think that's a universal truth that just being subtle about something is universally better.
I think when done well, subtlety always beats fucking punching someone in the face with exposition and information. If you can deliver it, if you can get the message across in a show don't tell way, it's way more effective.
It depends on the story, and the viewer as well. There's various things that you can't make.
But the fact is that you have to pay so much close attention to something that is so repetitive. It's just a bit numbing after a while.
I was gonna say, because that, I mean, that's like most movies would have a kind of bit like that. I feel of just a character mentions something, character does it later. That's not a kind of new level of subtlety, really. It's a fairly typical
I
movie
think it is.
thing.
I think it's enough because the time between those two moments where he talks about something casually in conversation without bringing that much attention to it, and the part where he actually does it is enough to actually forget it, and then you remember on repeated viewings.
It's a big part of his character, though, because he's talking about how he kind of bottles things up, and then she's like, "Nah, maybe you shouldn't bottle it up." So
No.
it's
But
a
the
big...
precise moment where he says, "Oh, do you know that in so and so they actually have a thing where they go somewhere and they dig up a hole and they say their secret."
Yeah, I mean, I remember that bit when it came up,
rather than being part of his entire character.
I remember that bit when it came up, so I remember it's a reference to earlier.
Yeah. And don't you think it's better that it's done that way, where he talks about it casually in conversation without saying that he's going to do it and then actually does it later on, rather than going on some sort of, "Oh, we're spending way too much time
my
talking
feeling
about
is,
this one
but
thing."
it doesn't make me like the film, basically.
Okay.
It's like
It's the thing that it has a lot of things like that are just sort of subtle details you have to be like really paying attention for. I say really paying attention for. You just have to remember, and it's just like kind of just gets like a bit like there's so many scenes that are just like, oh, it's actually we were just rehearsing what just happened. And you just like, oh, am I really like have to keep this relationship quadrangle in my head to like understand the scenes?
I don't ever think it's particularly hard to follow.
It's not that it's hard to follow. It's just a bit.
It's trying to dissuade you in a few bits. Like there are scenes that are set up in the kind of, ooh, what's going on here, and then it twists it all.
Doesn't mean it's hard to follow
rehearsed.
just because it deceives you temporarily, and then you can see what is actually happening. Doesn't make it hard to follow. Or
I'd
any
say
less
it's
complicated.
trying its best to kind of make it hard to follow in a way. It's
Then why tell us what's actually happening then if they're trying to make it hard to follow?
don't feel there's a lot of times when they do tell us what's actually happening.
I mean, yeah, okay. But that's because they trust us to realise what's going on underneath. The scene where they're both talking and, what's happening? She asks the guy who you can't quite see is Mr. Chow, are you seeing another person? And then you realise that it is Mr. Chow. I mean, it's telling you outright that they are, of course, rehearsing. So it's not hard to follow. It's there. You can see it. It's never particularly complicated for me. But having said that, yes, you do have to be paying attention. You do have to be watching the film.
There are scenes in which and for me this is a strength where it deliberately deceives you in that you're not sure if they're being them or if they are playing as their partners.
And I think that you can tell, maybe not at first.
But not at first. Eventually you do, but that is a thing that the film does. I'm saying this is a good thing.
Yeah, no, I know.
A scene will start and there'll be 2 minutes where you think it's just them being themselves, and then suddenly they'll be like, no. And then you've realised that what you've just seen is something different.
Yeah, and then you realise exactly that it was just a rehearsal.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's hard to follow because of that.
I think by the hard to follow point, the film does drop you in media res. Like immediately, it just starts, and the people are moving in, and there's just you get bombarded with names, and you kind of
There were so many names.
Yeah, you do have to kind of like it. I think a rewatch would help because you do kind of have to pick it up like as. Yeah, it's like jumping into a moving car. So
Maybe
I
I'm
kind
speaking from the standpoint that I've watched this film 3 times, so
Yes.
I know it pretty well.
Yeah, like it does. I wasn't a big fan of the opening because, as well as having to follow all these names, obviously because I subtitles I have to read. But then I kind of suddenly noticed that what the film is doing. Like obviously my context going into this is that this is probably the last film, along with Mulholland Drive, that's considered one of the all-time greats. Like obviously like all the classic films, and a lot of those films I bounced off, like Tokyo Story. Wasn't the biggest fan. I like Vertigo, but it was something that just stopped me from loving it. And I had a kind of similar experience with Vertigo to this, where I see what other people see in it. I see the artistry. I see that every shot is kind of framed in this interesting way. But that was almost during the start when I was trying to follow it, kind of distracting.
Yeah.
The fact that every shot is from this alternate angle, like it's all like you hardly see people's faces, and when you do, they're kind of obscured. There's no two shots. You never get a mid shot where you see two people's faces. It's always a shot reverse shot with an interesting angle. The fact that they don't show the partners' faces, I was kind of thinking, oh okay, and then I had to catch up with the flow of the film and what it was doing in the filmmaking, as well as the actual like being
Sure.
bombarded with like all the context and like the
And that might be a distraction for you, but for me, it allows me to get more involved with the film. It allows me to pay attention.
yeah.
a bit
I mean
more.
that stuff is all done for a reason. I think it's not style over substance. It serves a purpose narratively. But in your first viewing of it, especially when I'm thinking, okay, so I have to follow the plot of this film so I can enjoy it and pay attention to it, and also I have to analyze it because I am going to be talking about it and I want to review it and I want to review why this is considered great. It was slightly distracting, but that's I understand that's kind of a fault of my own.
Yeah.
But it's odd because I think I've liked something about this one stuck with me. In that I like it more than I did when I first saw it just a few days ago. I'm glad I've had some time to sit on it. I mean, first of all, like we said, show don't tell. It is as Kermode would say, it is a film that is a film. Like everything is conveyed visually in a really interesting way. I mean, I said the alternate angles were distracting, but as I grew into the film, I really came to appreciate them, and the color palette, like the vivid reds. You know, you mentioned the slow motion scenes. Like I really love those. Even though they are repeated, it makes the mundane something special, and I really love that. And also the fact that everything is essentially like a one shot on people's faces. You know, you very rarely see reactions to what people are saying. It kind of gives this great sense of isolation, and like the fact that they're both couples, but they're both framed as individuals. You never see the couple, and even when they're together, you never really see a two shot of the two of them. And the only times you do is when they're kind of pretending to be the other people. I really like that. Is that conveying of a sense of isolation. I love that there's so many scenes of people eating alone. I really love that image of just like being part of something greater of a couple, but being forced to eat on your own. That kind of isolation. I really like that. I said I wasn't emotionally affected by it. Obviously, I wasn't like fully emotionally invested, but the tragedy of it did hit me. Like the fact that it's essentially obviously the central premise is quite tragic, but the fact that they keep missing each other, and especially that epilogue where it's like he goes back and then hears that there's a woman living there with their child, doesn't realize it's her. You know, she comes to the apartment, the cigarette. Yeah, the fact they keep missing each other, and like the miscommunication and the inability to kind of be open and accessible with each other's, I found really interesting. And I say found interesting more than like really felt, but I am starting to feel it. I definitely think I'd like it more on a second viewing. Kind of reminded me of Vertigo. I'm going to stop in a minute. What's the other thing I'll say? Oh yeah.
No, it's okay. Keep going because you're doing a better job of describing why it's a good film than I am. That's
Alright.
for sure.
I tried to read a little bit about it, and because like I liked it. My theory on why Vertigo is considered great is because it's essentially about Hitchcock and Hitchcock's obsession with women, his obsession with film. It's about watching someone. It's about voyeurism. It's all the things he loves, and critics and like wank about how good that is, even though the film itself doesn't benefit from 20 minutes of watching a woman walk around and do her daily chores. With this, there's some like kind of socio-political stuff that I didn't pick up on because obviously it's set in the colonized Hong Kong in a transitional period, and the fact that the characters are in these transitional periods of their lives is interesting, which obviously I would never have picked up on that without reading some reviews of it. And the flash forwards I think are quite good. Ending with the text I wasn't the biggest fan of because it's in a different language, so
Yeah.
obviously the subtitles are very quickly flashing up and not giving me much time to think. There were like that. There were a few barriers that stopped me getting completely emotionally involved, but I do think I will enjoy it more on a second viewing, and it has grown on me. I think I see why it's considered one of the best films of all time. It's not one of my favorite films of all time, but it is very good. Done. Sorry, I talked forever.
Okay, we can wrap that up then. So catch the target in the dragon.
Harry, go.
I mean, Tony hasn't.
Yeah, I don't want. I guess I do kind of see the technical skill in this film, and I've been
But
kind
you
of,
don't see the emotional appeal.
because I've been trying to like keep a bit of a. I mean, Jono's said the complaints that I agree with. I thought, I'll be the one sort of contrarian, you know. So I'll leave to the end. But no, Jono's been in there, so I'll say that this film has like a really odd tension between being really like detailed and subtle and like, oh, you have to be paying attention, with the fact that the story just feels kind of slow and like nothing is happening.
With the subtlety, I feel like the two central performances are really good, and like the fact that all you really see is them, and I think a lot of gets conveyed through the kind of, especially him. I think the lead actor in this is phenomenal. It's one of my kind of favorite performances I've seen in a foreign language film. I thought it was
With it being two central performances as well, the fact that the fact the film rides on so much being between just those two characters and trying to fill like an hour 30, hour 40 minute just on those two. I mean, I think they do a pretty good job keeping the pace going and keeping it consistently good.
I think I would defend a slow, subtle film because obviously Godfather Part 2 is coming up, and I want to butter you all up.
Is that really? Would you say that's a really subtle film?
Apart from the scene where Al Pacino shouts, when he becomes shouty Pacino for a scene, Al Pacino is very cold in it, and I think he's doing a lot of very subtle things in that film.
But it can be too cold sometimes that it gets into the point of being kind of uninteresting.
But I feel
Pacino, I think.
I mean, we'll get into it. But there are definitely scenes in Godfather Part 2 where he's trying to. You can see that he's trying to appear cold when really he's feeling things. And I feel like that's a really good point.
Sure.
And like
Maybe,
this,
yeah.
when you have to kind of put on a happy face, say everything's okay, you know, like living with a partner, kind of having to come to realise the truth, and then obviously it was made in the 2000s, set in 1960s. The fact that the kind of conservative values of not being able to be seen with this woman, like having to suppress that, and especially his performance is great. Also, the confessional scene in the rain is really good. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt that there's a lot of like I never really felt like I was in the headspace of the characters because they felt so tied down by a whole bunch of dumb rules. Like, I've got to stick with my husband who's obviously cheating on me for some reason, you know.
But that's the sign of the times, and
I know,
this is a different culture and a different.
But it's also the fact that like I'm not part of that. Like that's not something that feels like believable to me. It just feels like, well, they've
But children being half human, half wolves, yeah.
Because they're real children for most of the film.
They're real people.
Yeah.
In a real time where these kind
I don't know. It's just like it's not something that makes me think like, I really understand how the emotion she's feeling. I really feel as conflicted as I guess she's feeling, because it's just like, well, don't really kind of get it, you know. Just it never really like sold me on it emotionally, and so it felt like, well, it's asking me to pay so much close attention to this film, but I also don't feel that there's much there.
Also, the fact that the camera is very subjective. Sorry, I'm choking. It kind of, you never like, the camera never puts you in the hands of the characters, like, or you're watching them, but you're always watching them from a distance. You're always watching them from like behind things or hearing their voices detached. The camera, like, I feel like in a film in which you're meant to relate to the central protagonist, like a film like Punch Drunk Love or something, like the film will kind of position you with them. Like you'll have a first person shot of a car crashing, and you're like, what the hell? And that's how Barry's feeling at that point. Whereas this is like you're kind of hearing things and seeing things from weird angles. Like you're almost watching from a distance. But that emotional distance makes it hard to relate to the characters. But now, I didn't at the time, but now I kind of see the appeal of keeping slight emotional distance, because that's how the characters feel like.
But there's some distance, but I still feel like not only is it close enough, but there's not actually that much of a physical barrier, because the rooms and the areas are always kind of closed off and quite, compact.
But it
still feels like you're getting an inside look.
You always get the sense that you're kind of one of the people that they're living with. That you're not really seeing everything. There are scenes towards the end where it does pull you in. You get close to this. And I remember like obviously the red curtains and stuff. Also the use of red, it's so good. But it's hard to get emotionally invested. I get it. It's hard to get emotionally invested in a film from in another language. So there's that barrier in another culture. A different time, different value system. I kind of get that, especially when the film's not like giving you much in the filmmaking to kind of.
I still can, but I feel like if the film does a good enough job, it doesn't. The language nor the culture matters for me. If they're human, and I can care.
Yeah, they are.
They just don't seem human in this.
Yeah. They're trying. It's a lot of repression.
They feel really artificial, and that is partially because of the fact that they are like pretending for so much of the film to be someone else. But then there's like, well, why do I really care then?
I'm not sure if I'd agree with artificial, but you're right. There isn't a lot of positivity. They do look quite miserable and sunny most of the time.
It's very sterile.
Yeah.
Was sort of the thought that I was having.
It says sterile, but then there's just pops of colour and there's moments of beauty, and you'll see the same shot 3 times, and then there'll be slight changes. Like there'll be a wedding ring on, a wedding ring off. There'll be like these moments that kind of it starts like that, but I feel like it grows into something else.
Just never felt to me like they were in the mood for love.
Yeah, I'd say for a film put in the mood for love, it is quite emotionally far away, but it does grow. You do have the moments, like those slow motion scenes are essentially just like take my breath away, flicking the hair kind of moments.
They didn't add it. I didn't see what they were there for, to be honest.
Okay, that's fair enough. I feel like they kind of do well to take quite mundane tasks and make them something else. kind of elevates them. Like just because obviously it's a very conservative culture. It's like just like a glance between the two of them is like they make something big out of it using that kind of technique of slow motion in the music, which is really good.
It just felt like, oh, it's been a while since we've done this. Here's her walking slowly to this music, which is why.
I mean, not all of them worked, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, it's. I guess I didn't have a problem with repetitive music until I noticed it was being using, and then every time I noticed it, I was like, oh no, they're using it again, you know. And like I suppose it's trying to build like a theme. It's trying to build that repetition, so you can notice, you know, the subtle changes over time. But for me, it did just feel quite dry, just seeing her walk out of the staircase at the same time as the other guy. And it's like, oh no. I don't know. I don't really feel like there's an hour and a half worth of thing in this film, you know. I don't really know what they did in it.
Well,
I can't really remember much of what happened.
Yeah, I think the guy who made it, didn't they start without like a script and stuff? It was kind of he just let the actors do what they think the character would do. And
Yeah, I remember reading
it's
that.
it's kind of compiled of a lot of the same shots but alt versions, and it's a very I definitely get not liking it because it is alternative. I don't know what's the word to describe it because I wouldn't say it's too experimental.
Well,
It's very unique. Like it's not like nothing I'd seen before. It's been the way it's shot and the way it's presented.
I mean, but it's yeah. This is going to sound really pompous and arrogant, but it's to do with the fact that it's quite. I think this is like a byproduct, but it also I think shows what kind of film it is. But it is like a BFI film. It is like a critical acclaim kind of film. It's the kind of film that critics like, but popular people, but popular audiences probably won't be a fan of because it doesn't have the key components of like a mainstream film. It keeps the pace going.
It's definitely
lively action stuff like that. It's very, very different. It's one of those films. That's why it's. Well, Mulholland Drive's like a weird. We should do that for the podcast one day. 'Cause that's a weird film to talk about because I don't see the appeal with that film, frankly, and I don't understand why critics love it so much. I mean, the only reason I can think of people loving that film is because it's just so weird and explains nothing.
Yeah.
And people love that.
I mean, like I feel like you normally can see what's in a film. Like there's normally an element, and this is definitely the richness and the uniqueness of the filmmaking. And it leaves enough. There's enough quiet moments, enough subtlety, which invite interpretation. And obviously, my big theory on film criticism is that the more ambiguous and the more interpretation you allow, the more critics will enjoy a film.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything else to say? I feel like I do, but Harry with his film analysis has taken my breath away a little bit, so I don't really know what to say.
I'm like
anymore.
Jean-Luc Godard, I've left you breathless.
Why doesn't he do it another 2 times? But this time he has a wedding ring on.
The evil guy.
Why doesn't he
Like
do the
Persona will do the same thing again, but we'll have the camera and Ethan. Yeah, this has really grown on me. To be fair, like when I first finished it, like I was left a bit cold, but like it really has grown on me. I don't know why. I think it's maybe seeing Persona changed my opinion on
Well,
film.
you've seen the BFI in look.
It shifted me.
Yeah.
You've changed since that car ride.
Yeah, me embracing Persona. I don't know. Must be it. You know.
He's become gay.
That's what it is. Yeah, just.
It's annoying. I want to talk about it more, but I want to say more things, but nothing's coming to my mind, and that probably gives you. That doesn't sound great, but
Acts as it's like the film. You know, there's so much to say, but they can't say.
So
It's like In the Mood for Love.
I'm surprised I've said as much as I have because I'm
Yeah.
very uninterested by this film.
Yeah, same. Again, I was just sort of left with the impression of this, like it being quite dull, you know, quite caught between being detailed and having a lot, but then having a lot of like nuance in it, but then being stretched over something where it's like, God, what did they? How many times did they go and have noodles? How many times did they go and sit in a taxi? And I get that like one time she like reached for his hand, and the other time he also reached for a hand, but it's just, I don't know. An hour and a half's a long time, and it doesn't
it's
really.
quite
For a film,
short,
it's not that
really.
long.
I know,
Yeah.
but like the things you could do with that time, and compared to how much little it actually says, despite its detail
I
and nuance.
think it accomplishes an entire romance / non-romance. I think it shows an entire story between two people and what they have to do.
Long for a piece of art.
Yeah.
Because it's. I don't want to get into this whole argument.
I don't know. I really don't think that you would lose much if it was half an hour long, like a short film. I don't know.
I think a good painting could get this film's message across.
Yeah.
Every frame of paint.
You know what he did a video on? Wolf Children.
Nice. And there will be blood. What's that? Now you see it.
Should we just?
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, let's wrap it
I
up.
think
Let's wrap it
everything
up.
I gotta say can be summarised in 5 minutes.
Alright, yeah, so I'll start. So, Jesus Christ. Yeah, basically everything that Harry said. That's literally it. No, what do I say? Yeah, so like I said, I've seen this film 2 or 3 times with 2 or 3 different people, and I feel like I notice new things each time that I wouldn't have noticed on the first viewing. I kind of agree with you. I feel like with another viewing you understand, I think you can get more of a grip on the story, and that may not be the best thing for you because you didn't like it the first time and you found it quite dull. But for me, the more I watch it, the more I realise, the more I see. That's how I feel. Anyway, I think the 2 performances, like Harry said, really, really are great. They're not particularly animated or over the top or Daniel Plainview-esque, but they are very, very reserved. And there are moments when, in fact, in that montage, I think it's the second one where they're going down to buy noodles, and I think it ends with I don't even bother looking up, with the man, with him eating noodles, and the look on his face is a look of such misery that I don't think I've seen it in most films. I mean, like Harry said, he looks completely isolated and just extremely kind of, I guess, sick of it all. Anyway, from where I'm sat, and I think you can see that throughout the entire film, really, in both of them. I think the moment when you see her crying is really, really good. Well, again, you get kind of a blurred view of it, but you can hear the sound, so you can get that emotion across, for me anyway. And there'll be scenes when she's just stirring a cup of tea or just looking aimlessly somewhere, and it's just that pensive attitude that I like in that character, in both of them, in fact. And like Harry said, missed opportunities all the way throughout, and it feels like there could have been something more between them, but because of the certain circumstances that were there, nothing happened, which is a shame. And it's also the best film to watch on Valentine's Day if you're single. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I really like this film.
Okay. Yeah, best Valentine's film if you're single is
Bruges.
What?
Just a run time.
I was gonna go for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
But I feel like even that has like a little bit of hope in it, whereas I feel like In the Mood for Love is just, no, they'll never be together. That's just the way it's meant to be, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, there is, I don't know, you probably know this film better than me because you've probably seen it more times than I have now, but doesn't Eternal Sunshine end with them saying, oh, but I like that about you, and they say, oh, you may not like this, I mean, you may like it now, but you won't like
I'd
this
say they
later.
both end on like they're both, the characters aren't together, but they are at peace.
Yeah,
like,
I feel more optimistic about Eternal
it's
Sunshine.
not like In the Mood for Love doesn't have like the ending's not like
Love is bad.
heartbreaking. Like they still are. It's just a missed opportunity. It just wasn't meant to be. But like the 2 of them are, they're still okay. Like I think by the end of it, that's the way I read it.
Well, I shall springboard off your ideas of missed opportunities and you know.
I wish I'd missed the opportunity to watch this film.
No, I feel the film itself is because
That was good.
Yeah, because the film.
You should hate this film.
The film is trying to be the story it's showing, which means it as itself is a missed opportunity with, like, I can't remember exactly the words you said, but a lot of words you said describing the relationship was like, yeah, that's how I describe the film itself, a missed opportunity that never quite gets it in a way. I don't know, yeah. I'm just very apathetic about this film. I just don't really care.
Do you not care if they end up together then?
No.
Okay.
But like, if I guess it was meant to be like the end. You're meant to be like, oh, they missed it. They didn't get together. It was like they never did anything to mean they should be in my mind. Yeah, it's just a 5 for me. It was just like, meh.
Should I go next?
Yeah. No. Tony next.
Alright.
We'll have the
I want to teach you a lesson.
sandwich.
Fuck, I
What?
Wait, can I go, please?
Alright,
No,
fine.
oh.
Go, Harry. Go.
Look.
Gonna end with Tony. He's gonna shit all of it, shit all over it, and that's gonna leave it with
Alright,
a sour
Tony,
taste
you
in
go,
my
you
mouth.
go.
For fuck's sake, I'm being thrown around all over the place.
No, I'll go.
I'm being my
I'll just go
my
again.
third. To be fair, you could just go again. I think we have similar opinions on this film. I will say that I think it does. I think it is like, I don't know. It, as an exercise in the things that people normally consider to be good in a film, such as, interesting framing, having subtle nuance. Although I do feel that it does just use a lot of those for the sake of having them, in my opinion. It is like a good technical showcase of those skills, and like you do feel it in some
having
places.
said that, I mean, sorry to interrupt you, is there any film that you can think of that you love that you feel like has those things, has subtle nuances, or are you just against those in general?
I'm not against them in general.
His
It's-
point is, he feels with this one, it's doing it for the sake of it and not.
No,
for
but I'm
the
trying to.
story.
I'm asking.
I
For
do
a film
like-
where it does it. And it
I
works
said
not for the
like
sake of it.
interesting framing, and I'm like Blade Runner 2049 is like a well composed, well shot film, like this is, but it was just more enjoyable to watch.
Okay, and do you think Blade Runner has subtle nuances as well?
I'm sure like other mystery films that I do like
Just
are
rips
there.
off her.
I'm gonna.
Actually,
Your favourite film?
Yeah.
I actually got a bit annoyed. I was like, wait, what? This is just a scene from her. Anyway, sorry.
Well,
Realizing Blade Runner 2049 is still one of my favourite scenes from that film, was just from another film, kind of annoyed me. Anyway,
I don't know. I don't think a film that is this reliant on such a simple like idea of just an affair, but just layered with so much nuance, is the thing that I would like, because normally it's something that is kind of neat, like you notice it and it aids the experience, when you notice something like a cool like little Easter egg, like it's Adventure, there's Batman in the background of this scene.
It's the bike from Akira.
It's the bike from Akira, exactly.
Those are things. There's a term for it, but those are things that they're just to get some emotional, like a cheap emotional response out of you. In the Mood for Love has little things that transpose across the course of the entire film rather than being in one scene.
Yeah, okay. So, but it has so many of those callbacks that I just feel like that's the entire like thing that you would be thinking about as you're watching, rather than just sort of being like, "Hey, I actually care about what these characters are doing." That being said, there's one subplot where that's about the guy wanting to be a martial arts serialist. And that was really interesting in my opinion, because it showed the character had like drive. It showed that he wanted to get out of the situation that he was in. It showed that he had something in common with the not his wife but the other person that he was trying to get along with. Yeah. It's just I don't know. It sort of ends on that like, I guess it didn't happen. The end. So I think I will stick with a 5 out of 10 in my opinion.
alright.
The floor is yours.
Look, I'm very tempted to give it a 7 just to show you that 7s can have artistic value. But I think I won't. This film really reminds me of Vertigo in my reaction.
You give it a 6 instead.
My reaction to it.
Is another 5.
Yeah, watching the film, I was kind of I was in awe of it, but I wasn't really feeling it. And then afterwards, just thinking about it, like there's a great saying which I love, where great films start when the credits roll. It's essentially like it's the feelings you're left with, it's the questions you're left asking, it's the images that stay in your head. That's what real films do. Like it's great to have like a bit of escapism.
I mean,
but like
right.
when I watch a film like
Great
La La
films
Land,
are great films.
Look, I watch La La Land, I'm swept up in the romance, I love it. But then when the film finishes, it just leaves my mind. It's completely flashy, and then nothing else. Whereas this film's really stuck with me in like the 3 days since I've seen it. And I've watched some great films since then. So I think I'll give it. But my rule is also, if I'm not that emotionally invested, I don't go up to an 8. I think I will give it a very low 8, because like I do have that rule. I've said that I really enjoy it. I've told you why I've enjoyed it. I've also told you why it kind of emotionally didn't entirely work for me, and how I found the opening a bit distracting because of it. I'm very sure that when I watch it again, it will be a decent 8. Because I will like it on the second time. But I'll give it an 8 now. And also I just want to say that you can still love something and then give it a 7. So it can be interesting and not work for you. Like Vertigo, I'd give a 7, but I'd still recommend people watch Vertigo, because it's a film that I think you should
Would you recommend
watch.
a 6 out of 10 though?
I mean,
No, that's way too low. A 6, I mean, that's like fine, very missable. It's possible.
maybe a very high 6. Maybe like Silent Running, I fully accept would work for a lot of people, and I would recommend that to some people, even though I personally wouldn't want to watch it again. That's a 6 I'd recommend.
Yeah, for me, the idea of just like, well, I guess I would understand or on a rewatch, but I don't feel the film compelled me to like rewatch it. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an acquired taste. It's
Okay.
it's definitely
It's like wasabi.
like yeah.
My wife liked wasabi.
Ethan, you'll be glad to know it's better than John Wick.
Oh, thank God! That's all I was interested in.
I think John Wick's,
Just by 1 point.
John Wick's good as well.
It's
Just
not as
wanna
good as
say that.
Ponyo, though. It's 1 less than Ponyo.
So what did it get out?
27.
Oh, that's a bit harsh, but you know. Well, what do you know?
Okay.
But yeah, no, and just a little thing like...
Oh wait, sorry, I'm 1 below Ponyo, did you say?
Yeah.
Alright, it's a 10.
Yeah, a little thing I'll add is that it hasn't stuck with me. I've watched a few films afterwards. Right now, all I can think about is The Princess Bride. So, you know, make of that what you will.
Fair enough. It's an acquired taste.
Yeah. Should we move on to, as Jonathan calls it, Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger?
Yes.
Yeah. So...
You cut out there, but I still clicked it on time. I heard 5, 4, like 2 click.
Yeah, I don't know how good my connection is.
Oh, that's fine. We'll just.
Ejiro.
Because I ended up hearing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, click. I was like, oh, you're fucking with us, Harry.
Suspense.
Yeah,
Is everyone recording then?
Yeah.
Nice.
Maybe when people finish talk, we'll give like a long pause before replying,
Huh?
just in case we're out of sync.
Or clap sync, Harry. Is that?
Okay, should I start rambling then?
Yeah, I mean-
Hello and welcome to the other half of the Media podcast we were just doing, where we've seamlessly transitioned into 4 different spaces, and are here to continue with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Ethan.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
as Tony said, my other choice along with In the Mood for Love was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's an Ang Lee directed film. I think one of his first ones as well. I think this was probably the film that got him well known. I think he probably became even more famous after doing the Hulk film and Brokeback Mountain as well.
After a bit of a Hulk down.
Yeah. So the film stars Chow Yun-fat and Michelle Yeoh as these two warriors. And essentially what you've got is the entire story revolves around this sword, and is it called the Green Destiny? Do I have that right? The Green Destiny.
Yeah.
That's right.
Green
And it's
Destiny
this
sword.
super powerful sword, basically, and everyone kind of wants it. So that's kind of like the golden amulet of this film, pretty much. So you have that, and
Is that a new plot device? We've
well,
developed?
I think when we talked about golden
Like,
amulet,
just every film needs to have
yeah,
a
well,
golden
for the
amulet.
golden amulet, it's point A to point B.
I mean, the
with
correct
golden
name
amulet.
for it's
That's what
MacGuffin.
you got to do, I think. Whereas this is just kind of running around in circles. But anyway. So you've got a bunch of different parties that are interested in this. What you essentially have is, as I mentioned, Chow Yun-fat and Michelle Yeoh. The sword actually belonged to Chow Yun-fat's character. I can't remember his name. And he decides to donate it to an old friend of his, who is sort of this. He's basically the emperor. He's the guy in charge of his own province. So he has it in his possession. And then the sword is stolen by this young ninja who is so obviously a character that you've already met. Like they don't even do a good job disguising that. But you have that. And she's being the person in charge of her is this person called Jade Fox, who is this really old witch who killed Chow Yun-fat's old master. So you have this really cool dynamic going between all these characters, where some of them hate each other and some of them like each other, and it all revolves around this one sword who everyone wants, essentially. And I think the main thing about this film that for me is what makes it stand out. I mean, I haven't seen very many martial arts films, so I can't really compare it. But to me, the combat in this film is excellent. Like, I know that we watched it all together and we were kind of chuckling away and going, yeah, no, that's kind of silly. But to me, I don't. If I hadn't watched it with you, because I don't think that it would have seemed silly to me. I think it's really, really good because what this film does that's unique is the way the characters move in air. They almost kind of glide, and they sort of. I mean, it's like a mixture of flying and a mixture of. Yeah. I guess gliding is probably the right way to put it. And I think watching with you guys has made me see that at parts it kind of doesn't look as good as normal. But it's still really, 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 really well done. And what makes it so cool is the fact that it's almost as if it shows how elegant and graceful these warriors move. It almost gives the appearance of them flying. That's their ability. And what we have as well later on in the film is this fantastic sequence in trees as they kind of fly through it. And they're able to position themselves so perfectly and so weightlessly on these branches and fight, and it makes the film it makes the combat seem so almost ethereal and so kind of weightless and fluid as well. It flows really, really well, the combat. I mean, there are moments I think the best examples of these are in the first scene where the sword is stolen for the first time and Michelle Yeoh is chasing her, and the camera sometimes pans down to their feet and it almost gives the illusion that they're dancing. I mean, the way they step over each other and they knock each other back is just so it just flows. It flows really, really well, I think.
Yeah, that I found great. I'm more in the boat of when they're flying, it just looks ridiculous. But when I find the combat a lot more better when it's grounded like that kind of almost dance-like thing. And there's like a bit where it's kind of like a dance or like weird kicks they're doing with their feet. And I just can't. To me, when they are flying, it just looks too much like the actors are being hoiked in the air with
you can almost see the string in some way.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, but you can see it's there. Is the feeling I often get, and so it just kind of looks like it's the actors sometimes just wrestling with the fact that they're occasionally flying in the air. So I see it like that. But yeah, I can appreciate that you see it more elegant than I do.
I feel like I could go on like a 5-minute rant about just the action choreography of this film. And since the film is mostly action, that's probably a good thing that it is interesting. That that it's like it doesn't I wouldn't say repetitive, but the fact that the fights do feel like it's never like they dramatically like there's one fight that's like a way different to like the other one. They're all pretty much mostly like 1 versus 1, sword or like weapon duels, and I think it still, manages to keep it pretty engaging. I'll say it's good. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, like all action great action ties to kind of characters, and like there are definitely like early on there's scenes where it's kind of hard to follow who's who because the film starts with such a big exposition dump. It's almost laughable, which I kind of love.
Yeah, let's get that.
A lot of things I'm going to say might sound negative, but I kind of love them in this film. But yeah, you start with a big fight scene, and then you kind of learn character dynamics through that. And then especially like some of the one-on-one duels, it's normally characters who are kind of, you understand their conflict and why they're fighting. And it kind of reminded me of the way good Star Wars films do lightsaber fights, You kind of know what everyone's about and you know what's at stake in this fight, and it kind of makes you further invested. Also, the choreography is pretty great. And I'm a fan of the flying, even though I think it's slightly goofy. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it shouldn't come off that way, and maybe it's a bad thing that it comes off that way, but I just kind of went with
Well,
it.
for me, I have the benefit of having seen this film, I think, like a long time ago. I think if I'd seen this film for the first time now, those aspects that you guys point out would have been more apparent to me, because I have a good memory of the fight scenes not being that goofy, that when I see them again a lot older, I still don't see that, because I've still got the old me in me somehow.
Yeah, I wouldn't definitely. Overall, they're not like comical fights. They're not like Indiana Jones level sort of slapstick. Like, you accidentally trip on a banana and then your enemy stabs another guy or whatever. Like, I definitely think for the moment to moment, like, just sort of people punching, you know, and the fact that you get this sense of who's got the initiative, who's got the momentum in the fight, you know, you get like it's like a very well delivered sense of like, okay, you know, of action, of intensity, which is really fun to follow. Except for the fact that it's the kind of thing where in anime, right, if someone's really fast, they'll become invisible, right? They'll be like, oh, he's too fast, I can't see him. That's almost like what my mind becomes. I'm like, these movements. I wish I was fast enough to watch this film, but I feel like I'm not, which is a shame, because I definitely feel that there was a lot of practice, even in getting a 15 segment section of this film like on point must have taken so much practice, and I wish I could just appreciate that better, you know, see it at like half speed and it would still be just as interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's right, because the fight scenes themselves, it's not the fact that they are brilliantly choreographed, it's that they're so fast paced and rapid, and there's 100 moves flying per second as well, to get all of that down and to make sure that it all fits together nicely and smoothly must have taken so much effort as well.
Yeah. And it does strike me as a bit of a shame that it almost does seem a bit wasteful that it doesn't present such intent. I suppose the point is that it's like Fate Apocrypha style, right? Just so fast, it becomes a flashing light show of just overwhelming your brain. But the fact that, like, there's one scene that I really want to point out at the end where it's like, oh, if you can take Green Destiny from me in 3 moves, oh, whatever. And it's the fact that it's like, okay, 3 moves, my brain can comprehend the number 3. I should be able to follow what's going on and see the 3 moves happen. But even if it is 3 moves, it just happens in like a blur, in like a what was that kind of thing, you know? And I just can't, I didn't know what the 3 moves were, and they were only 3 moves. He just had the sword. Like, it might as well have just been like a blinding flash of light, even though they went to all that effort, which does seem a bit, I don't know. It is good, but I wish I could appreciate it.
So you're talking about that more negatively than you are positively.
I'd say it's not that hard.
I don't know. I feel like it's the kind of thing where I really appreciate the technical achievement going on, and I do get it. It's just the fact that I don't think it's a fault of the film. Is my thing. I definitely, you know, it's not like I had a bad time watching it. It was just kind of like I wish I had that speed to understand.
But having said that, do you think that it's not that much of a problem because of the fact that, it's very rapid paced and it just flies so quickly, but it's the fact that the combat's mostly always between 2 people, so it's easier to concentrate and focus on these 2 people fighting, rather than if there was like a massive army of people flying kicks at each other every like microsecond and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think even it does a good job of, like, despite the moment-to-moment moves being so fast that you can't really follow like how one punch is countered and how one person sort of follows that up, you do get a sense of like who's winning. You know, there will be moments where it does sort of slow down and someone does some ridiculous like cross like punch type thing that shows like, you know, they're in the lead right now. You know, it just, you can't really keep like a second by second score of what's happening. If that makes sense.
I get that. Harry, what were you going to say a second ago as well?
I was going to say the film got pulled over for going too far. No, what I was going to say is that like, this isn't like me trying to like go, oh, I got you, Tony. But you did pick Red Line.
Well, that's the thing.
That film is very fast,
I would say, but it's never like frenetic action. It's more like it's intense, but I felt like my eyes could always discern what was happening and what would lead to the next shot. You know, it never felt like a blur. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I just found this easier to follow. Like, I don't know. I never felt too kind of lost. I feel like even scenes where it's going too quick and you can't really understand what's happening, I feel like that's always a choice.
Yeah, I definitely see that it is like they wanted it to be this way, artistic choice of giving that overwhelming sense of speed, which I do like,
Yeah, I really like the decision to kind of balance those kind of really frenetic action kind of choreography moments with kind of moments of elegance and grace. Like the only thing I know about this film before going in was the kind of standing on the trees fighting. And that's just some cool shit.
Yeah, it does a lot of the cool ninja shit which you want to see going in. It has just a moment where they just run on water, and you're like, that's cool. I like that.
Jesus, Sonic.
Sonic. No, it's Dash from The Incredibles.
Just Frozone behind them, just freezing.
Held the X button to kind of use the rings.
Doesn't work. No.
God.
Elise.
Jono, what did you think?
So a bit after watching this film, I saw The Princess Bride, and was struck by some sort of similarities in a way. And like both have masked characters you just immediately know who they are. They have a kind of silliness in a way to all the fight scenes, and a sort of overall feeling of just a kind of classic tale, basically. Although I much preferred The Princess Bride, I think, because it is a lot more tongue-in-cheek. I don't know, with this, so I did enjoy it. It's just feels like it's been a while.
Yeah, we should have done it that day when we were doing what In the Mood for Love. Why didn't we do it straight afterwards?
Yeah.
Was it already too late or something?
Questions.
I think
But,
it was tired or something.
The other day though, I was I don't know. I was just like, I'll show some random clips of some of the fight scenes to some of my friends, and point out how kind of weird it is the way they sort of glide around, and sort of their reaction to it was just, that's well shot. And
Yeah,
sort
it
of
is,
like, no, it is good. I think I'm slightly wrong when I laugh at some of it.
I think it's.
I feel like mostly this is just me sort of going, I kind of feel slightly bad about laughing at it, but it's, I don't know, it's not stuck with me particularly at all.
Alright, I think the big thing we're going to talk about is the flying, right? For some reason in our review. And I think it's just interesting how, like, the fight scenes are all the things that a human realistically does, by the fact that it is shot in live action and you see a human do them. So when it's just the flying that is the one thing that is like a supernatural element, right? It's one of the there's a couple elements as well, like the running on water and the whole Wudan technique, which I don't know what that does. It like turns your body into rubber and makes it so that you can not be hit by attacks. I don't know. But anyway, like it's mostly like grounded in the combat sense. So when it gets to like the jumping, you're kind of like, well, I was sort of sold on this being like a realistic, like grounded sort of thing. And then the flying is more like, okay, I'm gonna have to suspend my disbelief, right? But then, so you get to that sort of, I guess it's just a sort of way of showing that they can jump really far, kind of thing. Like, so you sort of accept it, and then it sort of, the film has an exponential growth curve of things you have to accept, and I don't know, I feel like it would have been like, because it hits you at like each point when you realize it's more supernatural than you thought it was, is kind of like a cognitive dissonance kind of moment, because you think, okay, it's like you accept the fact that it's just a weird jump, okay, fine, I'm ready to enjoy the film now. And then there's a bit where the guy just points and he flies, he just Supermans, and it's like, so it's not jumping? I guess they can just fly? And it's like,
there's a line, like the first time they ever mention in the dialogue that they can fly is just a bit like in the kind of one of the final confrontations where they're just like, oh, why did you stop flying? I was like, oh, guess you can then.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think, I don't know, they had like a massive exposition dump at the beginning. Also, we can fly. would have taken 3 words to say at the beginning and would have alleviated a lot of my problems. But again, I kind of appreciate the fact that it gets crazier as it goes.
That line you were
Kind of do
talking
like
about,
I sort of-
where it says, "Oh, why didn't you fly?" or whatever. I don't think it was. I think that was a. Now what's what I'm looking for? No,
That
it
was
wasn't.
a Gandalf moment. They were saying like,
No,
"Fly,
it
you
wasn't.
fools,"
Actually,
you
yeah,
know?
it was a Gandalf
But
moment
they were
because
telling him
it
to
was.
run.
I can't remember what it was. I can't
I mean, you
remember what
can
it was
take
in
it either
relation
way.
to, but I remember it being more metaphorical than it mean literally, and them literally saying, "Oh, so you do have the ability to fly."
But they can
No, it's-
fly though. But
They can on
is the
screen, but I
thing.
just think it's a poetic way
this
of
is kind of
showing
like
how they
going
move
into-
more than anything.
Okay, yeah, I understand that, Ethan. I do get your point. I do get
It's
your
like
point.
going into a musical and just going like, why does everyone burst into song? It's like early on the film's just like, yeah, this is a thing people do. Get on board with
Yeah,
it.
but
You know, I think
Yeah,
it
yeah,
matches with the kind of the mystic kind of
I
tone it's
suppose.
setting.
Yeah,
It's,
I-
Like
it's
you
not,
do
it's
get
not
used
exactly
to it.
historical.
You do get used to it at some point.
Yeah,
We did
I-
accept the
Just
flying
go
at
with
some
it.
point.
Yeah, I think we should sort of try it because it feels to me like it's kind of one of those things. Either you watch it and it's for you that they like fly and you can see it as a poetic thing or whatever, or you just look at it and it's not there. And I feel me and Tony are on one side, and you two are on the other, and I feel like we're just going to annoy each other as we continue on and kind of
Ethan,
reduce this film just to simply to is it that what is flying?
Yeah. To be
Yeah.
fair, like
Let's ban
I
flying.
do like the
Oh,
idea
that's
of
so
it.
good.
I do think it is good. I was just gonna say, Ethan and Jono, do you remember Mechanics M1
I
from
do.
A-level maths? How when an object is a projectile and it's been thrown, you know, it doesn't have any external forces acting on it. So it's apart from aerobatic, we ignore that. So its motion will always follow a parabola, right? Because it doesn't have any like forces acting on it
Yeah.
when it's midair. And you see them jump and you're like, that's not a parabola, mate. That's not x squared or whatever that. I failed mechanics, obviously.
Yeah,
That's
but
my
in
point,
Crouching
like,
Tiger,
you-
Hidden Dragon, they
You
do
do have, like,
include
an-
air resistance.
Maybe that's how they do
That's
it.
what they're
Maybe
kicking
they manipulate air
The
resistance and can fly.
Wudon method is just understanding air resistance.
I don't know. I mean, Tony, I know you were using that projectile model for comic effect, but I think we should just like accept that they can fly rather than having some scientific explanation. for
Okay,
it.
yeah. Okay, and to be honest,
Yeah.
I did accept that they could fly at a point in the film, right? It's just that there were a couple stages where you are hit with the fact that you have to accept something that you were kind of not expecting. But you know what?
Yeah,
I'm over it. I've said everything I
Doesn't
want to say
feel
about
like
the
it's
flying.
introduced in a
Yeah.
in a good way, but yeah, I like. But the main thing I'll say about it is I would have preferred a more grounded
Sure.
interpretation.
Or they could have lent into
Literally.
it more. They could have lent into it more. They could have been even stupider from the beginning. You know. But anyway,
Well-
I think we've said what we can say about the flying, and we can talk about other things.
Hang
like
on,
the
hang on,
romance
Tony.
subplot.
Tony.
Harry brought up Redline earlier. We should go back to
Would
this
you
one.
would
Hello?
you have preferred it if instead of flying they'd have just said no, we're just falling with style?
Well, that's the thing. You can tell that Buzz Lightyear is always gliding.
Yes.
Can
I
we
was
please move
I
on?
was going to ask you guys
It's
what
getting
you think.
pedantic.
Well, there's two things I really want to ask you. First of all, is what you think of that chunk at the middle of the film where they show the backstory between Jen and her lover in the desert, and also what you think of the ending when she jumps off the bridge as well. By all
Alright,
means.
can I
Yeah,
go
go
quickly?
ahead, Harry.
Because I do like the film, but both of those things I wasn't the biggest fan of. Like that
Yeah.
extended flashback went on for so long. I almost started to doubt that it was a flashback. I was like, is this a different character? Like, is this? I'm very confused here. This is going on for a very long time. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. It kind of pays off with the ending, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't my favorite element. And as good as
Is
that
she not?
character is, she's not my
Is
favorite
Jade
character.
Fox your favourite?
No, I mean, I love the name Jade Fox because it kind of plays into the inherent silliness of the film.
I swear Jade Fox
I
is a
do
Metal Gear
like
Solid villain or something.
Yeah, I mean, just I can't remember the line that made me laugh like a lot about Jade Fox.
Just
like,
all the
different,
Fox
like-
jokes.
Yeah, all the Fox puns that they were using, and also Jade Fox is a woman, which is another great line. And also quickly on the whole laughing, I never say I'm laughing at the film. I'm definitely laughing with the kind of the silliness.
It's not
like,
too
when I saw
up its own arse.
yeah, when I saw like Avengers Endgame, which is a great film by the way. There are scenes in that film which I was laughing at because I was just enjoying it. I was just like, oh, this is great. You know, I'm having fun here. This is I like the lighthearted tone. There's definitely moments of Crouching Tiger where I was laughing because it was also the finger bit, yeah. But there were moments where I was laughing because I was enjoying the kind of the tone of it. But I'd say the kind of moments of inherent silliness, it does balance with great moments of kind of pathos and sadness in the same way that I would say like the original Star Wars does, and I'm sure some Kurosawa films, which I do need to see, do. Of this kind of like this master apprentice kind of bond, and like I don't know, it did pretty work for me. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
That's fine. I will say that I actually quite like the content of the backstory. I think it does a good job of setting up, like, you know, interesting characters, setting up motivations and stuff like that, you know. Just being an interesting story of having to get another magical golden amulet, which in this case is, of course, the comb. But you know, I think it's really interesting how it tells, you know, the story of how those two characters met and how their relationship evolved over time. But
it's not really important to the rest of the film.
Exactly. But I feel like on the other hand, it does sort of just kill momentum, and I do think that there is a certain set of advice that are backstories. You probably shouldn't have to do flashbacks, and while I don't always agree with that, I do think that in this case it does sort of sap a bit of that. Okay, we've just introduced this character now. Let's explain that whole thing for like half an hour, kind of deal. But anyway, I did like it though. I do quite like that character because, you know, up until that point she's kind of a villain. You know, she's kind of a bit of a, you know, the wolf guy from Wolf Children. You know, sounds a bit evil, but then that sort of helps to, you know, give her a bit more of a human side, which, you know, is good. It might have been just the best way they could have done it, to be fair. Because unless they would have had even more exposition at the beginning, it was like, but Jade Fox also has an apprentice who is blah, 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 you know, and also we can fly. Maybe it just would have been too much for the beginning. And I think the beginning strikes a pretty fine balance as it is.
Yeah.
Right, Jono, what do you think?
I sort of agree with Harry, and well, yeah, you were the sort of killing the pacing. It's kind of, and it does just feel like it kind of almost goes into another film for a bit.
Yeah, I agree with
that. And the ending scene, I just loved that was spoiled by the DVD we were watching.
It is a bit of a Godfather Part 1 kind of. Guess who's dead in this?
Isn't it also a Godfather Part 2 as well? Don't they have that?
I mean, I haven't seen it yet, Ethan.
Yeah,
They
and
don't
Part
actually
3. Part
show
3 is the
that,
worst.
do they? In
They
Part
take
3,
like a shot from the final
in
10
the
minutes.
opening thing.
Part 3, they show a very
Scene with the
They show a
orange.
very big moment. Like
No,
a scene,
Oh, scene on the
on a
bridge.
bridge.
I'll pretend like I remember what that is, but I have no clue.
No one remembers that.
I mean,
film.
speaking of
We're going to record the podcast immediately after seeing Godfather 3, and none of us will be able to remember.
I mean, the
anything that
Vatican
happened.
is involved
We'd all like it,
somehow,
'cause that's
right?
just the
Isn't
Godfather
that
3.
like the plot? The Vatican are doing stuff with oil or something.
It's a bizarre film. It was nominated for Best Picture, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, with her jumping off at the end, I wasn't sure how I felt about it because I think this film does a kind of interesting thing of setting up two sets of like of romantic interest. It's got the older one and the younger one, right? And I sort of was getting the implication that like the younger one was, you know, gonna learn from the mistakes of the older one, but I don't know. I feel like especially towards the end where it's kind of like the guy who is the romantic interest of Jade Fox's apprentice says like, oh, if I can't be with her, then I guess I just don't care about my life. and the film kind of says like, oh, that means you don't really love her then. And he kind of just gets kind of dropped for the rest of the film. He just hangs out at Wudan, which, by the way, I thought the whole point of Wudan was it was just like this impossible place that like only fucking elite.
Are you
swordsmen
sure
could get
they're at
into.
Wudan?
But apparently it's also
Are you
an
sure they're at
Airbnb.
Wudan
So,
at
you
the end
know.
of the film?
Oh
Though?
well. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
maybe
they
I
say
can't quite
Wudan.
remember.
I'm
Well,
fairly
see,
confident.
the thing is, I quite
But
like the
anyway.
ending because, well, I mean, it plays into the whole fact of there being some level of ambiguity there because she jumps off the bridge, but because they can fly, you don't know if she
Yeah.
survives or not, or if she's trying to escape that life and move on to something else, or if she actually does kill herself. It's difficult to determine. I think the last thing that we actually see is just her hovering over the screen, don't we? Which makes for an interesting final shot, but it's still there nonetheless.
Yeah, maybe that's the kind of ambiguity for the sake of ambiguity kind of thing, though. I feel like maybe I don't know. I do tend to prefer like concrete endings. You know, we've been over this with Spirited Near, but if, I feel like in this case maybe it was the best option. But I feel like some sort of definitive message that she had learned from her time as fighting the warrior guy who has green destiny, forgot the names, all of them, but would have been nice to end the film on, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I see that. I get that.
It is interesting though that how it plays back to the what's it called, the mystery of how like, oh, if someone jumps off the top of that mountain, you know, off the top of the throat of the world, you know, uses Fusrodar to blow Lydia off the top of High Hrothgar, then of course they get a wish, you know. And I'm not sure, what did she wish for? Did she wish for anything in particular? Have I forgotten something? Or is that left also ambiguous?
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember that.
Mystery. Yeah, no, they in the whole backstory thing, there's a bit where the guy points at a mountain. He says, "Hey, you know, whoever jumps off the top of that mountain, you know, gets to make a wish." And so it does. I think that is a good like, in the mood for love-esque. Or were you paying attention kind of thing?
Oh, that's
to call back at
a
the
good
end.
show. I hadn't actually
They do
picked
kind
up
of
on
like
that. Hmm,
Oh, fair enough.
that's
Oh.
quite cool.
Yeah, I think that does kind of make sense that maybe she wished for something. Maybe I'd get a better understanding
I get that.
on rewatches, because I do think this film would be quite rewatchable in my opinion. It's, you know, it's quite fun. I don't know where I find the time for it though. It's quite long.
It's just 2 hours. That's the average length of a
It's
film.
2 hours.
Yeah, more than 2 hours.
Yeah.
All right.
Tony, I saw
I'm really
Endgame
setting my-
today.
My bars for film length time though. If it's not an hour and a half long, it's bad unless it's an MCU film.
Yeah.
That's my rule.
I think it's probably just with the pacing of the
Yeah, true.
having
Infinity
the-
War feels way
No,
shorter.
I'll be
than this.
I'll be perfectly honest. This
Yeah.
film is 2 hours, and Infinity War, not Infinity War. Well, yeah, actually, Infinity War and Endgame both felt shorter actually, and one's 2 hours and a half, the other one's 3 hours.
Yeah, I'd say the pacing's a little bit off on this film, but that
Yeah.
doesn't take
But I
anything
think-
away.
I
It's
think-
fantastic.
I think
For me,
overall it is very
I feel like we're going to start talking about Endgame now. But I feel like the good thing about Endgame is that there's always characters to watch. There's always someone doing something, so
Mhm.
there's never a dull moment in the entire 3-hour film. They've got the most incredible cast list. They've got like Game of Thrones levels of characters, so there's always something going on. There's always something to
Mhm.
follow. Whereas with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, there's only about 3 or 4 main characters. That's not to say that they should create 20 films backstory and have
Yeah.
more characters or anything like that, but I'm just saying that is because of that.
The characters are pretty well developed in this film. I definitely think their kind of relationships are good. And obviously, when the main dude dies, you know, I felt
That was
felt
quite
sad.
sad. I don't know. I kind of wanted him to live, but I suppose it makes sense for the film to.
I
have
do
him.
like the kind of dynamic that he had with kind of both of the kind of
Yeah,
leads.
although it is a bit of a shame though that like it's because he is like, oh, this person is my apprentice, you know. We never really see fights where they're like properly going for each other's throats, you know, like properly like, because this film does have like a couple like, you know, blood and gore like violent things, but I suppose most of the fights between, especially, you know, the two best fighters, they feel like they feel like they're pulling their punches, which is a bit sad. They get to points where they could have fucking hacked each other to shit, and that would have been cool. But I suppose then you've lost 25% of your cast if someone dies in a fight scene like that. And this film is mostly fight scenes; it would run out of characters in like 5 minutes.
Going back to what you were saying, I also feel like having like a goring, gritty aspect to this film probably wouldn't have suited its tone as well as other films.
That's true. It is kind of a bit more mystical than that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you do see Jade Fox get completely obliterated by a machine gun-esque Genji reflection of Bastion's turret, just obliterating her stomach, and you're like, yes, I want this film.
That's true.
I want a ninja just guts people.
I do really like that fight scene about 2/3 of the way in between Michelle Yeoh and Jen, where they're fighting inside the house. And Michelle Yeoh is gradually making her way round, collecting all the weapons, and all of them constantly being destroyed because the Green Destiny is so powerful. It just slices everything in half. And then there's that great moment where she picks up the really large thing, and up until then, everything has been so fast-paced. You've got this quite funny moment where she can't entirely pick it up and use it, and it falls back on her.
Yeah, that's quite funny.
That's a great little scene.
I think my favourite fight scene, though, is the one where the apprentice of Jade Fox... You can tell that Jade Fox is like the only English name in this film, because it's the only one we can remember.
Jen, she's called.
The apprentice of Jade Fox is in like a bar, right, or like a pub or whatever it is, some inn, and she just gets approached by like this army of like ninjas who have ridiculous names like Iron Fist, Sungwon, whatever, and she obviously just beats them all with Green Destiny, and I really like that fight scene because not only do you get the incredible like moment to moment like blocking, countering, punching at a really rapid pace, you do get such a sense of the setting of the fight. Like it's really well like shot, so you get like a really good sense of like area, of how, and also of how she moves between, of how she like flies all over the place. I think in that bit it really works because you just get such a great sense of flow in that space. I really like it.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say I feel like we've covered everything. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to mention about Silent Hill 2 that I didn't get the chance to mention on the other.
What
Just
last
podcast.
Jono.
Oh, okay.
No, I just said that as a
extra
joke.
time.
But yeah, no, I feel like I have covered everything that I
Could have
wanted
another
to, so
Endgame
it's up to
spoiler
you
cast.
guys. We can move on to ratings as well.
Yeah. I think it is. It is quite funny how In the Mood for Love, like, didn't like as much. I had more to say about it. Well, it felt like we went
Yeah,
off
this
on.
feels like a film that once you've said the action choreography is good, you've kind of covered 80% of the reason you like the film.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism.
Yeah, that's true.
But like, it
You
takes
should
up
just-
so much
You should
of the
just
film.
say it
Unless
like 800 times.
Yeah,
So,
unless we start to break
The
down
action
like individual
choreography
cool
is
moments.
good.
It's good.
I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I do agree with that, Harry. I think that's a problem with some things that are just like, I want to say like singularly focused in like one aspect of like technical achievement. There's so many times you can say in a Ghibli film where, oh my god, the animation is great, before you kind of feel like you're retreading yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say the only problem that I have is that I quite like coming from the terms of the storyline more than anything, I quite like how most of it revolves around this one sword. And that's like the part that you can follow, and you always understand how close people are to the sword and how it's moving about and stuff like that. But there's a lot of like political nonsense in the background that I just didn't care about. Like the whole,
Yeah.
there was like these,
Yeah.
I don't know, I can't even remember, it was so boring. But there's like an inspector, Yun, and then there's this guy who's been following Jade Fox around China for like
Inspector
5-10 years because she killed his wife or something, and then he dies in like the first 10 minutes. And there's just like,
Yeah, that's a shame. They do kill some people, though. I'll agree with that. There is one guy that gets domed by a weird bladed kind of disc-like thing.
yeah.
Yeah. I have no idea how historically accurate the weapons are. I mean, looking at the ones that are that are like the swords, like that looks like a classic medieval sword, right? But you get some like crazy shit in this film. You get like the oversized one that Jono said, which like, why do they even have a weapon that is too heavy to lift? You get like weird, like crazy, like there was one that I swear that there was like a long metal thing that was on the end of like a chain, and you also get loads of weapons that are just like really weird, like oddly shaped curved blades for like no reason. Like, were these real? They could all well be, for I know, but some of them did feel a bit like, is that true?
Yeah.
The real question is, what would win, the Green Destiny or that weird helicopter sword that Thanos has?
Helicopter sword? What?
Yeah, that sword that he spins like a helicopter.
Which one's that? Oh, there's that Thanos. Oh my god, yeah. I think Green Destiny would win, to be fair. I think Green Destiny is made of vibranium, and that's how it ties into the MCU. It's from Wakanda.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just Thanos shows up like partway through this film and just gets defeated in a sword fight.
No, right at the end you get the guy from In Another World with My Smartphone who just fucking defeats the person with a Green Destiny in like 1 second. Yeah.
I mean, Tony, you've already said Iron Fist. So come on, it's a crossover that's waiting to happen.
I wonder how the cast of this film would fare against Thanos, if they'd be able to do any better than the Avengers and all of those MCU characters.
I mean, it's the kind of thing.
Jade Fox wields Mjolnir. She is worthy.
She's definitely not worthy, Harry. She can't read. She can learn these incredibly ancient, like, sword fighting techniques which defy the laws of physics, but she can't learn to read Chinese. What? I mean, fair enough. I know Asian languages are really hard to learn how to read.
Also, if someone's illiterate, then someone's illiterate as well, aren't they?
Yeah, fair enough, but like, I don't know, it's kind of like a...
Yeah, I mean, if no one's there to teach you, it's probably quite.
Oh yeah, that's true. That is true.
And also, I'm used to
There's
the
no
idea
Duolingo
that, like,
in like the 15th century or whatever.
Mjolnir's just kind of there, like, you know what? This person can't read. I'm not gonna let them wield me. Like, I think.
Yeah, all right.
I don't think that's. It's not like you have to fill out a test. Is your maths good enough? What's your English lit skills like, or Chinese?
She also did kill a bunch of innocent people in addition to not knowing how to read. That's also my defense. I don't know.
Yeah. That's what I'd go for. Is that she's not a nice person, not that she can't read.
It would be quite funny if there was like a moment in this film where Jade Fox was just looking around and was looking at someone in particular, and then just pointed her finger upwards in like a really emotional moment.
So they beat her at the end.
She's an interesting character, Jade Fox, I'd say. The sort of, because she's like tried to, I don't know, yeah, she's tried to become one of these fighters, but wasn't allowed just because she was a woman.
Yeah.
Or at least that is sort of one of the entire. Maybe it was just she's a lying, not very nice person they didn't want to teach. But that
is true. But the thing
it seems to focus on a way with its kind of female characters being pushed into positions where they can't be what they want to be in a way, because you've got the female warrior who can't fully be whatever the term is. I don't really know. You've got the princess forced into marriage but wants to become an adventurer, and then you've got Jade Fox who again wants to be a warrior but can't, and so is pushed into this life of crime.
I am actually confused. Like, I'd have to rewatch it to give this film, other than the out of 10 score, which doesn't matter at all, I have to decide whether this film is either broke or woke, and like I'd have to rewatch it with like a properly like a lens to think, like, because there's a lot of things that feel like, okay, it's making a statement, right? Back in ye olde days, if you were a woman, you just got married off to some random guy that you didn't like, and so that's like, it points that out as a bad thing, which is good. But at the same time, the way it approaches it is like, don't worry, Jade Fox's apprentice. You're one of the good ones. I'm sure that we'd make an exception for you, is kind of like a, well, it doesn't. It's kind of caught between like accepting that it's wrong and just kind of like we'll just ignore it, make an exception for this one person. But anyway, I don't really.
Yeah, but
rate
she
films.
also does reject that and makes her own kind of path.
That's true.
I'd say.
You could.
I'd say it's a pretty feminist film, apart from like the Stockholm syndrome stuff.
Well, no,
and flashback.
but then there's also the Jade Fox being shown as like a you didn't tell me the secrets of Wudan even after I slept with you, which is like that's not a very. I mean, I get that she's a villain, fair enough. That's why one of the reasons Mjolnir wouldn't deem her worthy, but it's also a very bad female role model kind of thing of like
She's the villain, though.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like looking up to Thanos. You shouldn't do it.
Thanos is definitely a positive fuck no. I was gonna say, speaking of Thanos, can you imagine if he could also do the like graceful like flying leaps?
I mean, he can jump pretty high. I feel like they all can.
Yeah, he can jump, but could he do that like walking
don't
on
know.
air kind of thing? And how ridiculous would
Is
it
he
look?
worthy, by the way, Thanos?
No.
He lifts Stormbreaker, though.
Well, no, Stormbreaker doesn't have the enchantment on it, though. The amount of times I've had to explain this. Stormbreaker doesn't have Odin's, like, symbol on it. Mjolnir only has the whole only be able to be lifted if worthy, if statement in it. Once Odin says, like, whoever shall be worthy shall wield this Mjolnir and have the power of Thor, and then you see that it has like writing that like appears on it that says that, and until then it doesn't have that writing on, and Stormbreaker never gets that thing put on it. Anyway, we're going to be talking about Crushing.
Well, the thing is, when you mentioned Stormbreaker, I thought you were talking about the Alex Rider book.
This
podcast has gone off
batters
the rails.
people to death with that book.
Right, let's.
Remember when this podcast was about Crouching Tiger?
Yeah, I mean, to
Should
be
we-
fair,
should we-
I think we should do this from now on. If we have like extra time, we should just talk about random shit, just because it's funny.
Mediate 2.
Yeah, I think it's probably time though to slap some numbers
Yeah.
on this bad
Yeah.
boy.
Just one quick clarification before we go into numbers. Ethan, I thought you hated action films.
That's what you all think.
Just
I like The
justify
Departed.
yourself.
It's an action film. There you go. No, I'm not.
I mean,
I
but also like everything we've said about this film is pretty much just swap out, swords for guns. You could say most of the things we've said about this film for like John Wick, and you're like, action films. They're too
I mean,
lowbrow
you're
for me.
absolutely right, but
What?
personally, I have more of an appreciation for the combat in this than I do with a guy who just walks around and shoots people. I don't.
But can't you see that it's like the same amount of like technical
don't-
skill? Like, have you seen?
I'd say Crouching Tiger does more to set up like caring about the characters.
But you see John Wick's
Wick does.
dogs die,
John Wick-
and that really pulls.
Yeah,
on
but
the
John Wick's kind of
heartstrings.
the joke of John Wick is that there's so little motivation. It's almost
Are you
like
kidding? I was sold 100% on John Wick's character for the entire film from that beginning scene.
I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying that the plot in itself of John Wick is kind of funny,
Okay, fair enough. But
whereas Crouching Tiger kind of takes that kind of stuff seriously.
Mm.
And then when there's genuine
But
emotional
it's
moments,
it's not even just that. I do
And
think
this is the
I
guy who picked John Wick.
I will fully admit that I think it's more impressive and more of a technical achievement in the combat that you see in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon compared to the combat in John Wick.
Okay.
Now, I'm no expert
that
I'm no
may be
expert
true.
in
But-
what it's like to choreograph a fight scene. The scenes in John Wick may have taken more effort to shoot than the ones in Crouching Tiger, but personally, I have more of an appreciation for the ones in Crouching Tiger than the ones in John Wick. But you are right.
All I'm saying is that I have seen the footage of Keanu Reeves training to be to be in John Wick, and like they have turned that man into an in real life killing machine for the sake of those films, So like he actually can do all the stuff. That
Okay,
he does
all right.
mostly,
Well, this
you know?
is
But it just feels like a weird disconnect though, because like, all right, I don't want to sound bitter or anything, but you're like, oh, Akira, it's got too much action in it. And this is fine. You know?
Yeah, but I mean, but see,
it's-
Tony, when you talk about this thing, you are talking about it as if I am only focusing on the fighting and combat, whereas there are so many more aspects to a
fair
film that
enough,
I
but
consider.
Wouldn't you say that?
So when I'm talking about Akira,
wouldn't you say that the main appeal of this film is
yeah,
the fight?
and I'd say the main appeal of Akira is the
like Batman wouldn't be good if
Sorry?
it didn't have Batman in it.
if
though.
what?
Like, you know what I'm saying?
What?
like if this film didn't have the action and all that stuff in it, it wouldn't be anywhere.
Yeah,
near
no, it
as
wouldn't be
good.
anywhere near as good because the action does make this film. I just think that in Akira, you have the same thing. You have the action is the main appeal, but it just doesn't appeal to me personally. It's the. I mean, can you explain?
I wouldn't say the action is the main.
mean, I think
appeal
it
of
is.
Akira. It's got a lot of. It's got a lot of.
Yeah, and,
cool
and I
other
think this
stuff in
film
it
does as well. You're right. The main
Okay.
appeal is
All right,
look,
all right,
look.
all right.
Here's my thing, right? I like action, but if you want a film that has garbage story but good action,
What? I
What?
didn't know that.
no, I
But you
do
hate
like action. It's Harry who's brainwashed
Okay,
you into
okay.
thinking that I don't like action films, and in the most part, there are
Alright,
some that I don't like. But there are plenty of action films that are just action that have a garbage story, and I still think they're really good. But if you want to get me more on the side of the action, then make a video game, okay? You can have a garbage story in a video game. If the action's good, then it'll be like an 8 or a 9.
Well, all I wanted to know is how you reconciled that disconnect, and as long as you're aware of it,
Yeah,
then
I'm
that's
completely
enough.
aware of it. I'm
So-
completely aware of it. Tony, answer me
That's
this,
good,
right?
that's good.
If In the Mood for
That's
Love
good,
was
at least.
anime,
I didn't want
Tony.
to see any plot holes, Ethan. I didn't want to see
Tony.
any cinema sins stings.
Tony,
We're ready to
if
put
In the
numbers
Mood
on
for
this.
Love was an anime,
Yeah.
would that change your opinion on it? I disagree.
I mean,
I think if it
I
had been
don't
anime,
know.
you'd have appreciated it
I
more
know,
because
maybe I
anime
would. To be
appeals to
fair,
you.
To be fair, I wouldn't say I would. It's not like I wouldn't have liked it more. It's just that I still overall probably wouldn't have liked it. There are anime that I dislike. See the first half of Animediate, which is the show we have that's all about disproving this myth. Anyway, numbers.
That
Yes,
took a
because
while.
Tony asked me some. Yeah,
I
and
just
I
asked
answered
the
it, and then you felt the need to
Oh,
ask me
Alright,
more
so
questions. and
Crouching Tiger, Hidden
Harry,
Dragon,
Harry,
is a
stop
film
talking.
which
Harry,
I like.
Harry, stop
I'm gonna
talking.
give
Me and
it
Tony aren't
an 8
done.
out of 10.
Tony, you asked me a question. I answered your question,
I'm
and then
saying
your
we're done.
your solution
Okay.
to my answer is to just ask me more questions.
Okay, well, I understand it now, so we can go. We can slap the numbers.
And I'm going to give this film a 6 out of 10, and we'll leave you two to fight it out.
Right, we're just losing more and more people in this Discord chat. It's just going to be us.
Yeah.
We could just start talking.
Yeah,
about
I'd
Endgame.
prefer that.
Yeah, we could just do that when everyone else leaves. Yeah, I really like this film. I definitely would recommend it, but at the same time, like it does fall into that, action kind of easy to watch kind of umbrella. And while I do like the sort of emotional aspects, I do think the characters are pretty well done. I don't know. I feel like they could have done a tiny bit more with it. Like it's not as much as films that I really really resonate with the characters. It does mostly follow on the action. And so when it is in sort of that easy to watch sort of idea of films, I'm comparing it to the other action films, so like Tower Heist and John Wick, things like that. And I'm thinking like it just falls slightly below that in my opinion, but I do think it's really good. I think it still has a lot of strengths on its own. It's definitely worth watching. I want to get one tiny nitpick out of the way. I have no idea if they're historically accurate or not, but some of the costume designs in this films are properly bad. There's just a guy that wears a grey bathrobe, and that's it. It's just a grey bathrobe. I'm pretty sure that probably did exist, right? But it just doesn't look that cool. Like, I'm sorry. If we took the piss out of Han Solo in Blade Runner 2049 for just wearing a grey t-shirt, I'm going to take the piss out of this grey bathrobe that this one guy wears. Anyway, this has gone on too long. Solid 7 out of 10. I definitely probably would watch it again. And I'd recommend it.
And I think that I will give this film an 8 out of 10. Yeah.
Reasonable. All right, Jono, did you say it? Did you say your numbers?
Yeah, I ended up giving it a 6 for the reasons discussed before.
Yeah, we've got
I'm never good at these little summing up things.
It's no tower heist. That's all you have to say.
I'm sorry, it's not a biting socio-political commentary, Harry. I'm sorry. With Ben
I
Stiller.
can't believe Karl Marx just copied Tower Heist when he wrote Das Kapital.
We have the Communist Manifesto at home. Communist Manifesto at home. It's just Tower Heist. All right. Is that where we leave this this journey, this odyssey?
I mean, now we've done our numbers. You two can argue again if you really want.
What about Endgame? I thought, are we gonna foreshadow the next episode? Is that what we do?
I mean, you and Ethan were arguing about something. I kind of tuned out.
I mean, I think we've settled that debate now. I mean, I understand it from my opinion. Now, in my opinion now, I just thought he hated action films, but he doesn't. So that's all I needed to know.
Yeah, it's kind of just the thing that I was playing.
Well,
Can I just randomly point out that since starting this podcast, Chicken Run 2 has been announced. Chicken Run, of course, being my honourable mention for this year. So
wait, during
There's
the
a fact.
recording of this podcast, it was announced.
I know.
We've got our live reactions to Chicken Run 2. Oh my god. we should put up a video of us reacting to Chicken Run 2, even though we know it's already coming.
That's mad.
Alright.
Tony, do you want to set up 1999?
Alright.
Which is the next?
So for 1999 is my year, and I'm picking my childhood film, which I have no idea if it's still good or not, The Iron Giant, and specifically the PS1 content of the port of Chrono Trigger.
Just the PS1 content.
You can also review the rest of the game, if you want, but specifically that came out in 1999, the PS1 port of Chrono Trigger. I think we'll leave it at that right then, unless we want to talk more about Endgame. Ethan.
Ethan's vanished. So.
Yeah. Alright. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all, Dan, next time.
Bye.